What are the safety duties when you're working on a cruise ship? When you're hired to work on a cruise ship, you're actually hired for two jobs. The job that you have on your contract, whether it's broadcast technician, crew staff, waiter, bartender, whatever. But the second job that you have is your safety job. And I would say that your safety job is probably more important than your actual job, because in the event of an emergency, that is what your job is. And, if something's going on, you're not a waiter anymore. I'm not broadcasting anymore. I'm doing my safety duty. And cruise ships take their safety very, very important, or very seriously, and it is an extremely important aspect to cruising on a vacation, when you're a traveler, but as well as a crew member, you take it very, very seriously, because the safer the situation is, the more enjoyable it can be, and so when you first get hired on the cruise ship, the first minutes, you're inundated with everything, but the safety officer is in the room when you first get on the ship as you're doing paperwork. They're there day one, so, and then when you first start on your cruise ship, or like your first contract, when you first get hired, majority of your trainings, there's lots and lots of trainings, almost every day. So basically when you're not working, you're in training. And sometimes you're at work and you have to leave work to do more training. A lot of those trainings are safety trainings. Now, some of the trainings are not safety trainings, but everything is related to safety. For instance, there's a crowd management safety training that you have to pass. But if you think about it, if there's an emergency and you have to help crowds of people safely move somewhere, that's crowd management. It has to do with safety. It's all deliberate. We're not just taking training classes for no reason, and we're not taking safety classes just for no reason. It's very serious stuff, and it can be long, and it can mess up your plans. Like next cruise, you're like, oh, I'm gonna get off in Cabo and with my friends and blah blah blah. Actually, no, you're not, because you're gonna be probably having a training. You know what I'm saying? So it's something just to wrap your head around. And the thing is, before I worked on cruise ships, I didn't know that it was, I didn't know a lot about cruise ships anyway, but I didn't know that it would be like having two jobs. It's not every day, you're not doing your safety duties 10 hours a day like your other job, but you're expected to know it as well as you do your other job. It is just as important. That is part of the life, is when you're working on a cruise ship, is the safety duties. My first contract, and how it works. So there's, let's say on the medium, smaller ships that I worked on, there's about 1,200 crew members. There's not specifically 1,200 finite safety positions that need to be filled. There's a lot, maybe like 800 or so. And so for those other 500-600 passengers, 500, 400 passengers, or crew members, they your safety duty is basically just go to your specific designated mustering area, in the event of an abandoned ship kind of thing. And so you have to attend every crew drill, just like people who have other safety duties that involve passengers, but you don't have specifically to do a specific duty. You just have to be at the station ready, for your turn to go down the chute into the life raft. The first couple of months, and a lot of this is because you can't be assigned a safety duty until you've passed all your safety tests and trainings, and you've learned what it's like to do it. You know what I mean? They can't just be like, all right, go lower that lifeboat. I don't even know what you're talking about. You have to actually you have to go through these trainings. You have to become immersed within how the maritime law is and all these different regulations, and then you can perform your duty correctly, right? So that's why they do all the trainings, first contract every week, all the time. So for the first couple of months while I was doing trainings, my number was just, go stand at the mustering station with other crew members who don't have duties. Then I passed my safety test, and my first more specific safety duty, I was an assembly station leader in one of the restaurants. So you have assembly stations and mustering stations, and they're kind of the same, but the way I see it is the mustering station is where the lifeboats are. So if you need to get into a lifeboat and get into the water, that's the mustering station. An assembly station is not necessarily at the lifeboat. We had assembly stations in the restaurants. We had assembly stations in the theater. We had assembly stations at some of the specialty restaurants. And then from the assembly station, after everyone has assembled, the station leader and the crew members who work within those assembly stations will then lead passengers to the mustering station. You see, because there's too many passengers to all fit on deck 7. There's enough lifeboats, there's enough room in the boats, but there's not enough room on the deck to just meet. And it's just the organ. It's better to have separate assembly points, so we can take roll, we can make sure everyone is accounted for, and then we go as a group into our and every station has a designated lifeboat. So it's very well organized. It's just there has to be this organization for it to work, especially in an event of emergency, which is also why as crew members we train so much every week, all the time, and it becomes, it's for many crew members it is such a drag, the safety stuff, but the truth is it should be a drag because you're so used to it. It's so second nature. You can do it in your sleep, that in an emergency when things are going off and the power's out or something like that, you can do it in your sleep and it kicks in, you know what I'm saying? And you're in the mode and you go, and you don't have to, and you're like, oh, what, I forgot. No, you don't forget because you know exactly what's going on. So my first duty, as in one of the restaurants as an assembly station leader, and I actually didn't mind that. It was, I didn't mind it because my position as a broadcast technician, I found myself working alone a lot. I was behind a camera a lot. I was in my office with the door closed a lot. I wasn't out with passengers very much. And I like to talk, so I actually was okay with it because even though some passengers, when they're going through these safety drills, they're just as miserable as crew members who've been on the ship for 9 months doing it over and over and over. But it's nice. It was nice to talk to people, and for the most part, people are pretty nice. Passengers are very nice, and they see your name tag and they see where you're from, and they'll ask you questions, and they'll ask you about your job, and they'll ask you questions like, do you live on the ship, and all these questions that don't really make sense to ask, but it's fun. And that's what I say, and which is why I say, no matter what job you have on the cruise ship, it's customer service. No matter what job you have on the cruise ship, it's about the guests, and you have to be able to, to fit that role. Because even if your position is the lowest deck, never see the sun, never ever, if you have a safety duty that puts you out in front of guests, guess what? Customer service. Bam. Another reason why everyone on cruise ships is expected to learn is expected to be able to speak English, because when it comes down to it, and you need to help passengers, that's the reason. That's basically why every rule is formulated. Even crew rules have to do with safety, not just safety about in emergencies and we have to leave the ship, but like on my ships, crew members were not allowed to wear flip-flops, and one of those reasons was down in the crew areas, there's a lot of exposed metal. There's not carpet everywhere. And you can scrape your foot, you can get hurt, you can trip and fall. I mean, there's metal, you know what I mean? So it was a safety precaution for yourself, So we had safety rules that were to benefit crew members, like no flip-flops. And then we had safety rules that were to benefit everyone, like assembly stations and stuff like this. My second contract, my safety duty was a communication runner, and basically I would go into the bridge with the staff captain and the hotel director and the cruise director and the captain and all the big people on the ship, and we would stand there, and basically in the event that the telephones went out, walkie-talkies didn't work, all the power went out, the communication runners were there to help relay messages. So the captain would be like, "Hey, go find so and so and do this and tell them this," and then we would have to just go, right? And that was an intense position, not just because you have to know where every other assembly station is on the ship. You have to know who everybody is. You have to know everybody else's position, and you start out the drill in the bridge with all the big top people on the ship, which it wasn't intimidating because everyone's really nice and we're all working, but some people are very intimidated when the captain walks by, or when the hotel director walks by. So for me, it wasn't as intimidating, but still, you want to do a good job, and when every single boss of every single boss is in the same room, you don't want to look like you've been drinking all night and got 1 hour of sleep. You know what I mean? So, and then my third contract, my job was to just go to the pool deck and basically look and make sure that everyone on the pool deck was gone. So if there was an emergency and everyone needed to go to their mustering station, some people on the pool deck, people still partying or drinking or listening to music or whatever, you have to go and say, "Hey, you need to go to the mustering station." So, and then after that, so I was on the pool deck with my team clearing that deck, because every deck has people who do that, people who check cabins and stuff like that. And then after the assembly check is finished, then all of us who are up on the different decks will then go down to the mustering stations to the deck 7 where all the lifeboats are. So you start at the assembly station and then you go to the mustering station. Some people's assembly station is the mustering station. So if you're, let's say you're a passenger and you have your drill, which is always going to be, so the drill is, the safety drill is always on embarkation day before you leave port. Okay, so it's going to be day 1. It's going to be the very first thing you do, which is kind of rough in the service aspect of the cruise ship, because the drill can be tedious and long and unpleasant and crowded, and if it's in like Miami, it can be hot outside. There's just, of course, there's definitely ways to complain about it. And so what happens is passengers, they kind of wait in the long line. They're up early in the morning. Some of them had taken a flight for hours to get to the port. Then they have to wait to get all their information done, and and then they finally get on the cruise ship after all this stuff, and then they have to do a safety drill. And because a lot of times all they want to do is go and start their vacation, but you can't start yet until after the drill. That's the rule. So which is also why some assembly station leaders, like the position I had, didn't really enjoy it, because some passengers can get a little hard to handle, hard to communicate with. Fortunately for my position as an assembly station leader, I was in one of the restaurants, and so we had places to sit, we had air conditioning, mood music. It was great, absolutely great. And during the drill, we didn't have to, during the drill, we didn't have to actually take passengers from the assembly station to the mustering station. We just had to stay in the assembly, and then we would just tell them, "By the way, I'm the station leader, and all of us in this group that I've checked your names off, we would all go together to this particular lifeboat on this particular location in the deck." So it was pretty nice. It could some of the passengers who have assembly station drills on outside on the deck don't have as much fun. But that's how it is. It's something that's how it is. It's maritime law. You can't just not do it. It is very serious stuff. the safety trainings can be long, and they can really mess up your vibes on the ship. Like literally, it feels like you're having a safety training every day, and you're already tired, and you're already working so much, and then you have to go and take these classroom trainings, and some of them feel so dated and mundane, but the truth is it is so important. I mean, the amount of classroom trainings that I sat through, I think the reason that people can say how boring and dumb it is because they're good at what they do. You know what I mean? It's like stuff they've already heard over and over and over. And I think that that's a good thing. If you are bored at the safety lesson because you already know what's going on, the safety trainings are doing their job, because when it comes down to it, you have to know exactly what you're doing. I felt that I kind of got used to it. So how the drills work, though, you have the passenger drill, and then you have a crew drill. And depending on, as a crew member, your safety duty, sometimes you have to do both drills. They're not on the same day. The passenger drill is always before embarkation on day one. And then there's a crew drill, what seems to be every single cruise. I think the maritime rules are at least once a month, but I also think if you change itineraries, you have to do one. If you change embarkation home ports, you have to do one. Basically, if there's any reason to do one, you just got to do one. That's why I felt that there were way more crew drills than once a month would have been 6 drills. I did well more than 6 crew drills. And so my assembly station duty on my first contract, after I passed all my safety classes, I had to do the passenger drill on day one, right? So you have to do all the passengers, stuff like that. And then, 3 or 4 days later in one of the ports, they have the crew drill. And I also have to do the crew. So I had to do 2 drills almost every single cruise. It probably wasn't every cruise, but I had to do 2 drills whenever I had to do passenger drill and crew drill every time. And for crew drill, obviously it's just crew. It's the same thing. You go to the same station, you do the same thing, but there's just no passengers. And sometimes, and on the crew drills, the safety officer might do pretend fires to help out the firefighting team. They might do different emergency situations to kind of test out the crew and see how they handle stuff. So it's a little more in depth as like a rehearsal, a tryout for different emergencies, so that if there were passengers there, the crew was able to handle any situation. But having to do passenger and crew drill is pretty rough. Some duties you only have to do crew drill. For instance, when I first started and I didn't have a duty and all I had to do was go to the crew mustering station, I didn't have to do passenger drill. I only had to do the crew drills whenever they were scheduled. The communications drill, I did not have to do passenger drill. I only had to do crew drill. The pool deck checker position I did not have to do passenger drill. I only had to do crew drill. So it just depends on the position that you have. Now some safety duties are designated for specific departments and specific positions. Like, it made sense for me to be one of the communication runners in the bridge because I was broadcasting. I worked in the broadcasting department, so I was around the communication equipment, and I knew the communications officer, and so I was familiar with the elements of communication when it came to the cruise ship. So they put me in a position that was related to that because it did make the most sense. They put a lot of the entertainment staff in the assembly station leader roles because they're already front facing. They are recognizable to guests, kind of. You see what I mean? So there's a method to the madness, I guess you could say. All the youth staff don't have separate duties. all their duties are related to the youth program, because if there's an emergency and there's a bunch of kids in the youth program, they have to somehow get the kids to their parents, because the parents can worry, in an emergency, and so they use the entire youth staff as their duty is to make sure that the kids and the parents, they have a separate meeting point. They all have their own separate duties within that kind of element. So everyone has a role, and it is just as important, if not more important, than your normal duties on the cruise ship. So expect it. You're not going to get out of it. And if you fail your safety tests, you can't work there. They give you chances to take it a couple times, but if you can't pass your safety classes, you get debarked, because it's your duty as a cruise ship employee, to be part of that other element of living on sea. You know what I mean? So be ready for it. It's not that complicated. You just have to, but you sit through it, and you study, and you learn it, and you do your job the best you can, and then after your safety job is done, you go back to your regular job, and you work and work and work. But it's not a bad thing. So stay safe.